Oi oi, it's your boy Slack Sam Bellamy, and it's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Thursday the 4th of March, and we got UFC 259 over the horizon. I was going to say on the morrow, but a couple of days yet. But good card, I think we can all agree. With that said, there's a degree of bollocks to the good card, in that you've got Amanda Nunes fighting Megan Anderson in what is being billed as like a double champ fight. On the poster, they're like 5 belts, and you're like, well, one of those belts isn't being defended because it can't be, because this is a featherweight fight and it's a bantamweight belt, and then the other belt is a division that doesn't exist. But this is just like the Amanda Nunes story. It's not enough that she's good. It's not enough that she's the best women's fighter in the world at bantamweight. We have to make up further shit, get another belt on her. Everyone is sort of bored of the double champ thing. Even Izzy versus Jan is not really a double champ thing, because Jan Blachowicz is only champ because John Jones is taking a holiday to get fat and take a fight at heavyweight. But don't let that overshadow the fact that it's a fun fight. But yeah, I mean, the Amanda Nunes one versus Megan Anderson being billed between these two fun fights, one of them excellent fight, as if it's like the same thing, because they finally got 2 wins on Megan Anderson's record back to back. I mean, John Anik, I mean, he's let them get carried away with commentary lately, just talking bollocks, but he would win me over immediately if just when Rogan or DC starts talking about how Megan Anderson's been on an incredible tear lately, if he just went, oh, so many good wins, so many good Megan Anderson wins. What's your favourite? Let's both say our favourite on a count of 3. just did that. That would make my year, to be honest. Because Megan Anderson, like the last 2 people she beat, no wiki pages, obviously, but she lost to Felicia Spencer, who is so-so. But then they brought her in an opponent to lose to her, and then that opponent lost to Felicia Spencer anyway. And then she actually moved up the card in the loss to Felicia Spencer. Very strange. But, she's Megan Anderson, she's tall and pretty and has nice tattoos. And if you ever read the comment sections on any of her tweets, replies on the tweets, it's just full of weirdos being like, I want to suck your long toes. Yeah, she's here to get knocked out. See if she doesn't. I really hope she doesn't. I really hope she wins. But just having watched her fights, the best win is Kat Zingano. And that happened by Kat Zingano really declining hard after the death of her spouse and all sorts of other shit, and taking a toe in the eye. So, not to mention that Megan Anderson's best win was Zara Fan or whatever her name was. She previously lost to Sinead Kavanagh, so not great, let's be honest. But once we're done shitting on that fight, which had to be done, let's talk about the good stuff, because there's lots of it. Now, Izzy versus Jan, I'm going to talk about, but that's what I did a tactical guide on this week. If you're a Patreon boy, go have a read of that. If you're not, join the Patreon, go have a read of that. But you know the deal by now. Those are more detailed, sort of more well-structured analysis of the fight, but I will talk about it here. And some stuff I say here I might not have said in the article, some stuff I say in the article I might not have said here. I am a one-man meandering, tangent-filled stream of consciousness. That's what I do. That is this podcast. But then if I ever get Me Too'd, I never have to replace myself, which is fantastic, because I was catching up on The Fighter and the Kids. It's now The Fighter and the Kids, and it's 2 black dudes I've never seen before. But anyway, sorry, not making enemies today. We're talking about good fights. So Izzy versus Jan, very interesting in that everyone looks at this, and me and you and anyone else looks at this and goes, that is a horrible matchup for Jan Blachowicz. And yet, Jan Blachowicz still is the man with the belt. He's the man who is on an 8-1 streak. Bad fight against Jacare aside, and lost to Thiago Santos. But then I suppose that's included in the 8-1. But he's the man. He's on the streak. He's got the wins. Dominic Reyes is a better striker than him. Much cleaner, much more crisp and technical. Still ended up slumped on the floor looking up at the ceiling. So while we're all like, he shouldn't have the belt and he's a placeholder champion, he still does have the belt, and he won it by knocking people out. So there's always that to deal with for Israel Adesanya. I think the thing that, the reasons that we are counting Jan out, and the reason that he's in some places 2-1 underdog, are that his striking style matches up horribly with a lot of Israel Adesanya's best traits. If you watch like his fights against Corey Anderson, his fight against Dominic Reyes, he just reaches for punches and pulls his head back, which is... We talked about this with Paulo Costa and with Jessica Andrade. If you're parrying punches, it's so that you can move in or you can stay in range. If you're leaning away from punches, you're letting the punch fall short. If you're doing both, you're doing things that have conflicting goals. Like when Izzy was fighting Paulo Costa, he's throwing out the jab. Paulo Costa's trying to parry the jab, but also trying to lean back, so he can't get in afterwards to start throwing. And the same with Jessica Andrade anytime she meets a good jabber. But it gets worse because, like, if you watch him against kickers like Luke Rockhold and Dominic Reyes, he just sort of takes kicks on the arms, which, yes, technically it's a block if it's a middle kick and you've blocked it from... Well, if it's a body kick, you've blocked it from your body. But if we just use the term middle kick, all you've done is take a kick on the arms, and he doesn't ever come back with anything. And then he takes front kicks just straight in the gut and folds over and then walks back up to you. Like, he just stands there staring at people and reaching for stuff. And that's the opposite of the best base for beating Israel Adesanya. Yeah, like I said in the article, like, he takes forever to get his reads. He's known as this big counter striker, and he did. Like, he stunned Jimmy Manuwa with a counter uppercut. He stunned Luke Rockhold with a counter uppercut, which was so quick and subtle that people missed it on the slow-mo replay. At the end of that first round, he hits him with a counter uppercut, but everyone notices like the big booming left hook after it and the high kick that dropped him on his hands and knees. But he takes forever to get his reads, and he doesn't. You don't ever feel like he has got his reads. He just sort of decides to grit his teeth and punch. Like the Dominic Reyes fight, moments in the Corey Anderson fight, like he'll just take punches on the face and swing back, not really moving his own head or dealing with the opponent's offense, and outpower them, which is a legitimate way to win a fight. You know, this is the thing that we're going to keep coming back to. Yes, the way he does it is shit from a technical perspective, but it keeps knocking people out. So, you know, it's legit. But, you know, taking lots of front kicks and reaching for jabs, horrible, horrible habits against a guy who feeds lots of jabs and feints and throws lots of front kicks and hip feints and turns over high kicks in the aftermath. You know, that's just it's the setup for getting head kicked. That's what that is. Then you got the whole marching forward thing, you know, Jan's blitzes where he just sort of wanders forward, swinging hands. He's got the weirdest striking form I've ever seen. You know, I got into talking a lot about his strange build. Like, I've heard it called upside down triangle build, 1950s strongman, like cartoon of a strongman. I put one up on my Twitter, but you know, he's just all upper body. And it's interesting because I just listened to the Heavy Hands Boys and they brought up Bob Fitzsimmons. And back in the day, like the pugilists, the bare knuckle guys, a lot of them had very big upper bodies and very small legs, which is sort of in conflict with a lot of what we think of as good striking technique today. We think the power comes from your legs, from your ass. That's the Rampage Jackson quote. It all comes from the ass. But, you know, there's always been people who don't punch right, or don't punch maybe the most... who don't have the most streamlined punching technique to get every ounce of power out, but will get crazy power from nowhere. You know, George Foreman, one of the hardest hitters ever, mainly an arm puncher. You know, people always accused him of being an arm puncher because he just barely moved his legs and hips when he punched. And Jan is, I called him possibly the hardest arm puncher in the world right now, because he does just swap these weird swings from his upper body, and his feet are marching, but he's not like building power from the floor. But it makes him very, very dangerous in, you know, coming out of clinches with sneakers. You know, famously knocked out Luke Rockhold, but he hit Luke Rockhold like 3 times coming out of clinches. He hit Anderson and Santos and lots of others that he's fought coming out of clinches, just because he hits so hard with these weird swings. And then Israel Adesanya, obviously, his style we've examined to death. Lots of feints, nice long stance, uses both stances well, applies the correct thing depending on what the opponent's stance is. So if he's orthodox and they're orthodox, he's jabbing and low kicking. If he's southpaw and they're orthodox, he's kicking, you know, rear leg front kicks to the body, turning over high kicks, shooting left straights down the center, using left knees. And if they switch stances, you know, those switch around. So it's open guard, closed guard, rather than left stance, right stance for Israel Adesanya. Hasn't fought an awful lot of southpaws, to be honest. And actually, that's something that the Heavy Hands Boys brought up. He has a lot of trouble with the good left hookers and good left-handed southpaws. But the straight line charge thing really plays in because, you know, he's hard to hit with a handful of rice, and he's so tall and fights so long, and he does an amazing job of stretching his stance out and leaning his head back over his rear leg. And you watch like the Whittaker fight is the one where that was basically his whole game. But normally he's a more offensive fighter, but he beat up Paulo Costa on offense, and then when Costa came back at him, he just pulled his head away, cracked him, lunging in. And I wrote this in the article, like, the legs are always there. Every time we talk about Israel Adesanya, when he's pulling his head back and he's doing that retreat and then angle off into a different stance and pull his head back, the lead leg is always the last thing to leave. And dudes who kicked it, like Paulo Costa did a couple of times, Robert Whittaker a couple of times, they get it, but they immediately give up on it. Because that's the magic of Israel Adesanya. And, any great pull and, pull counter or the guys who leave their head out there and use it as bait, is they convince you that, now don't waste your time kicking the legs. Don't waste your time doing that. If you hit him once on the chin, if you get him perfect while he's leaning back, look how in danger he is. If you catch him, he's out. And they just get obsessed with it rather than, pump hands, get him moving back, kick the lead leg, which is what should be the strategy against Israel Adesanya for almost everyone. The Shogun Hua Lyoto Machida strategy. And of course to get him closer to the fence. And this is the intriguing thing, because like, no matter who you are, that's probably going to be the plan. But for Jan Blachowicz, that's a really important factor in it, because if you're just charging after him and his head's free to move and he's got room to retreat and cut angles offline, you're going to have a really hard time hitting him, and he's going to be swatting you with check hooks as you come forward. Whereas if you get him close to the fence where he can't lean away and pull his head back and stretch his stance out, and he has to circle side to side, even if you don't kick his legs, which is the best strategy along the fence too, because Izzy often does the best, the smartest thing, which is to get his feet level and circle and fake one way and go the other. Even then, you put him in a better position to trade with. And trades are where Blachowicz can win this fight, but trades are very hard to produce against a guy who, when I say trades, I'm not talking like they're both throwing punches. I'm talking they're both throwing and taking punches. That's what I'm talking about with the trade. Because if they're just both throwing punches, Izzy's going to pull his head back, and you're going to get the same situations that you got with Costa and Whittaker. You've got to make situations where it's hard for him to do that. But if you're expecting something new, like, it's the same with everyone. I'm going to say, pump hands, kick the legs as he leaves, work him towards the fence, kick the legs as he circles, try and slow him down, because the mobility is so much of what makes Adesanya great. Now, the interesting part of this is, there's been a bit of like, can he take light heavyweight power? And I'm not super worried about that, because I've seen him fight a heavyweight in kickboxing, or like 100 kilos or whatever it is. And in the striking, like, the finesse is going to keep him out of the way. But I am interested in how the wrestling works against a guy who's certifiably gigantic. It's not been super long since that Costa fight. And even if Israel Adesanya is draining himself completely, he's not packed on 10 pounds of muscle and then he's not going to drop 10 pounds of muscle again or whatever. Well, I mean, it's 20 pounds between 185 and 205. So he will be fighting at a slight size disadvantage, or maybe even a big size disadvantage, because the Jan Blachowicz is massive and drains himself to make weight. And to return to the Luke Rockhold fight, Luke Rockhold came in looking bigger. He made the plan to move up to light heavyweight. He took the time off. He packed on a load of weight. He looked absolutely gigantic. Got in there with Jan Blachowicz, one of the best, one of the strongest wrestlers in the middleweight division, off the fence especially, could barely move Blachowicz. Blachowicz was just a fucking lump, not being maneuvered around at all. No selling basically everything Luke did. When you get into like real light heavyweights, you're talking about heavyweights who can just about scrape the cut and do well enough dehydrated or drained that they don't feel the need to go up or fight as actual heavyweights. So once, Blachowicz can get a hold of him and grind him on the fence, it'd be very interesting to see where that goes, because, the size really does make a difference. Like, he had very little trouble wrestling with Luke Rockhold, but had more trouble holding down Nikita Krylov, who's not nearly the same level of technical grappler, but was a heavyweight, like a proper heavyweight, and is a big old lad. Anyway, it seems like it might all come down to whether the Fist of the Hanged Man is a real thing or not. They should have done an anime style poster for this. That would have been so cool. Jan Blachowicz's bracelet made from the rope that he found a man hanging from. Not much more explanation for how his career has gone than that, to be honest. It's very strange. He fights extremely sloppily, and he still wins. But then, power is the great equalizer, and being there long enough and being tough enough to stay in there is what allows you those chances. But anyway, wrote extensively about that at the Fight Primer. Go check it out. Let's talk about some of these other fights. Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling is an absolute banger. I wish I'd had more time to make something for this, because they both got fascinating styles. Petr Yan, obviously, amazing pressure application through his bantamweight run, and incredible combination puncher once he gets going. It's interesting because he tends to take a little bit of time to get going, and then just suddenly he'll be pouring on these salvos of 3, 4, 5 strikes, beating you up in the clinch. There's just a really obvious turning point. I remember watching, might have been the John Dodson one, might have been the, can't remember which one it was, but I remember being like, oh, why is he not turning it on yet? And then suddenly it just all went to shit for the guy he was fighting. Obviously, on a little bit of a strange run, because despite being the world bantamweight champion, his last 2 wins are over Jose Aldo and Uriah Faber. Neither of which has been anywhere near to the bantamweight title picture forever, basically. I mean, Faber gave a good account. Well, honestly, both of them gave a good account of themselves for how old they are and how far past their best they are. When you consider some of the guys that Jan has just gone through like a hot knife through butter, like a fist through a blancmange. And you're having to go back to 2019, June for his last, like, not going to say real opponent, but like young-ish in prime opponent. Jimmy Rivera had a tough fought fight against John Dodson just before that. And honestly, he's beaten Douglas D'Andrade, but going back to, like, aside from like Magomedov in ACB, not fought too many top bantamweights, which is quite interesting given how stacked that division is and how fast things are moving there normally. So it's not, I'm just saying it's interesting that it's not like a Max Holloway situation where you've got a guy win the belt and he's already fought basically everyone. Lots of compelling matchups in that division for Yan. And you've got Aljamain Sterling coming in as his opponent. Aljamain is on a great little tear. He's a pretty far removed from the guy who was losing to Brian Caraway back in the day. When was that? That was 2016, so quite a while ago. But he's on this great little run. Brett Johns, Cody Stamen, Jimmy Rivera, Pedro Munoz, Corey Sandhagen. And the Sandhagen one, obviously, is the one that caught everyone's attention because he choked him in like under 90 seconds. A staggeringly quick finish. But if you will watch, I don't know how much casual appeal Aljamain Sterling has, but if you were watching like the Rivera and the Munoz fights, it was pretty remarkable how well he'd come along on the feet. Since since those fights against people like Caraway and Asuncao. Very interesting striker, lots and lots of kicks, lots of side kicks, round kicks. It's a little like John Jones, to be honest. Just he's got this gangly build for his weight class. Why not just abuse the kicks? Because he's got strong wrestling, and honestly, even more than Jones, he doesn't mind being on his back, which isn't always a great thing. Like I think it was the second round against Rivera, he just starts with 3 jumping switch knees in a row and gets put on his back. It's very strange because I was watching the fights a while ago. I was going to do something about him, and I was watching the Rivera and Munoz fights, and I remember being like, damn, he's actually looking pretty sharp here. And then I rewatched them today without the sound on, and he really didn't look that great. He was quite lumbering, some of the punching, and he does just swing his head wildly from side to side and throw overhands. But the kicking, he also left himself out of position an awful lot, and that's something that you would never catch John Jones doing. He's ruthless, will not give up bad position, whereas Aljo is just like getting his back turned on people by accident, getting taken down off switch knees and things. He knocked down Jimmy Rivera by back fisting through after getting a kick parried, but I just can't help but remember Jose Aldo threw a push kick against Yan to try and keep him off, and Yan caught it, dragged it across, and stepped through with that, I suppose Uchimata on the back leg. Really cool throw. And popular in a number of sports, like in, maybe not so much in like Muay Thai, I don't think I've seen it too much, but it used to be very popular in point karate, because if you hit the back, that's a full point in Shobu Ippon or whatever it was. And it basically makes it hard for the opponent to turn and face you while you're sweeping them off their feet. And of course it's popular with grapplers because you expose the back straight off the single leg. Marcelo Garcia used to love that. But I just can't help but think of that when I see all these kicks that LJ throws out and how he leaves himself out of position. And a lot of Jan's best stuff is sort of slowly pursuing you and then starting to suffocate you. And if you're throwing yourself out of position and sprinting to get back in position or back out to range and reset, that's going to wear on you much quicker. Yeah, and obviously a good counter wrestler. And Sterling, not the strongest. He doesn't like bomb through people. What he does is he tends to throw weird kicks, level change, pick up like a snatch single, or go all the way to his knees and get the single, and then drive to the fence. And sometimes that means he can get on people's back, like Corey Sandhagen. But against people like Jimmy Rivera, he had a lot of trouble doing anything. Pedro Munoz too. Didn't really get an awful lot going in some of those rounds. It's really interesting because I was watching the Rivera one, and he does the Khabib pickup, where you have the underhook pin and then you dig the hands between the leg. You dig the hands between the legs, stand up and try and deadlift them by the taint, basically, and kick out their standing leg. And he just couldn't really do it. It really does. I mean, I was listening to that Dustin Poirier interview with Rogan, but it really does make you respect how awesome Khabib is at those things. He makes people look like they weigh nothing and just punts their leg out. So I think this is a real compelling fight. You could have a fight of the night contender on your hands here. It's interesting because Jan's, how many fights is he in now? 15 fights into his career. And I still feel like there's a lot we need to learn about him in specific style matchups. And Aljamain really turned around his whole style in like the last 4 or 5 fights, maybe. I was listening to the Heavy Hands, as I said earlier, and I couldn't, the same thing I'd seen that I think we're all seeing. It's like the Blachowicz one. We're all going, God, all these horrible things that stack up against Izzy's favorite habits, and then the one that we're all seeing with this one is just how much Aljamain throws his head around, like when he ducks low, or he'll do a big slip off to the right and then come back with an overhand and slip to the left. And he's doing these big leaning movements, and it's just, you're just remembering that Moraes one where he got kicked in the head, and you're remembering how much Jan loves to come out of clinches with head kicks and things. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by this one. I'm actually especially intrigued how the bodywork is going to affect Sterling, because he's such a tall, skinny fighter for the class. But yes, good fight. What else is on the card? Tons of stuff. Thiago Santos versus Alexander Rekic. That'll be your break in the middle of the night for just two big idiots swinging at each other. What else do you expect from that one? Oh, Makhachev versus Dober. Damn, son. That is a lovely fight. Makhachev, I'm so glad they're not doing the RDA fight. Because I don't need to see RDA versus another wrestler. I don't need Islam Makhachev padded up against sort of old-timers. Even though RDA is now like top 10 in the world at lightweight because he beat Felder. Very strange situation in that weight class. But Makhachev on a great run. Tebow, obviously the only loss on Khabib's record. Kajan Johnson, not so much. Arman Sarukian, very legit, but on short notice. And then Davi Ramos, very legit. Meanwhile, Dober on like a 6-1 run. The loss is to Beneil Dariush, but beat Berkman, Camacho, Tuck, Polo Hayes, Nasrat Hakparast, and Alexander Hernandez. And he knocked out Hakparast and Hernandez in his last 2, which is really quite good names to have knocked out recently. Had a couple of fights against Diego Ferreiro that have been cancelled, unfortunately. As we were always saying, those combination of names, just any combination of names, like the top 5 prospects in the lightweight division is awesome. But you got a very much a striker versus grappler matchup. Makhachev sort of being advertised. People have always said like he's kind of like a more well-rounded Khabib, and really what they mean is like he's not as good a grappler as Khabib, and he kicks a lot. But he's got serviceable striking. He keeps range well. He uses his left leg well. I think he's southpaw. He's southpaw. Whatever. I've seen him use his rear leg well a lot. And yes, he is southpaw because he does the overhand into the collar tie, which I really like. This is something Matt Linland used to do. And who else have I seen do it recently? Anyway, you throw an overhand on the open side. So his left hand against his opponent's right side. And then you basically bounce it off their head and bring it down into a collar tie, lean into them, and you start throwing uppercuts with the lead hand. And he's done that a couple of times, and I really like that. I was going to do a little video on it, but I couldn't be asked. Very heavy top player, as you would expect from Khabib Nurmagomedov's best friend. And basically the roundedness aspect comes in from, like, if you're Davi Ramos or whoever, he's going to kickbox you for the most part to make it easier and then hold you down when he can. If he's someone who wants to stay on the feet, he's going to take you down immediately like he did Jan Johnson. Just realised he dodged a bullet against Francisco Trinaldo. Damn. It's going to be so fun to look back on Trinaldo's career and just look at some of the prospects whose parades he's pissed on, basically. It's like... most recently Jai Herbert, but they put Felder in against him back in the day because they were like, we need this Brazilian who is 40 years old and doesn't speak English to not have an 8-fight winning streak, please. Paul Felder, go beat him, and Paul Felder got his ass kicked too. Trinaldo is easily one of the most interesting fighters, story-wise, of the last few years. But Dober, I'm interested in this one because I've seen Dober doing some wonderful work, sort of piling on the pressure on people in his last couple. And obviously very hard to get people stressing with your striking and then counter strike as they lash out at you if they can just drop on a reactive double or a single leg or whatever, because you're Islam. Oh, I mean, he has some lovely trips from the clinch too. Like, there are a lot of ways Makhachev can take him down, and there's always that question: can you open up with the striking if you're worrying about being taken down? So that's the sort of dynamic you're going to have play out in this fight probably. And then as you move into the undercard, you've got Dominic Cruz versus Casey Kenny on the undercard, which is firstly Dominic Cruz on the undercard, strange, but also this fight against Casey Kenny, strange. Because I was looking at Casey Kenny after his last one and going, this guy is pretty good. And then the UFC were just like, hey, you're like a budget TJ Dillashaw. Let's have you fight Dom Cruz, get him back in the win column. That one against Nathaniel Wood was really good fun. Lots of feints, lots of kicks. I just hope that he is smart enough to see what Henry Cejudo showed in Dominic Cruz. Feint him back, kick the leg that he leaves trailing. So many dudes, like Uriah Faber back in the day, Dominic Cruz puts his foot in and then bounces back in what I call the launch pad. He goes left foot in, left foot back, so he's in a little short southpaw stance, throwing himself all the way back, and then he comes back in again. So many dudes just kick at that lead leg and miss. You're like, no, wait for him to move, then kick the leg that is the lead leg once he's moved. And I remember when TJ Dillashaw fought him, people were like, you went, oh yeah, he mullered him when he actually low kicked late in the fight. And people were like, no, that was actually plantar fasciitis, Dom said. Just like, I feel like Dom's probably not the most impartial source on whether he was hurt by that low kick. When you consider that his whole style is based around his legs and not being kicked in them. But very interested in this one because Kenny's a competent wrestler, getting some confidence in the striking. I don't think he's anything near the hitter that Dillashaw was. Will he get drawn into chasing? The one thing you don't want to be doing with Dom Cruz is chasing. You can pressure him to the fence, as Henry Cejudo did, or you can back off and work on the counter, as Cody Garbrandt did, but you can't be just following him around the ring, because that's when he's got all the movement, all the angles, all that stuff that's going to make you look like an absolute mug. Do I think Casey Kenny has the skill to do it? Yes. Do I think Casey Kenny will do it? Probably not. I think the level of discipline you have to fight Dominic Cruz and not get drawn into it is levels above what most fighters, even the most talented fighters in the world, can show. Got to be extremely coachable to beat Dom Cruz. Which is even weirder because Cody Garbrandt did it and then lost 3 fights in a row by just getting moronic in there. Kyler Phillips versus Song Yadong is an interesting one. Why that seems like a step back for Yadong. What was his last one? The win over Marlon Vera that wasn't really a win. He's still on an incredible run, 8-fight winning streak, and they put him in against Kyler Phillips, who only has 9 fights, but on a little 3-fight stint, only been in the UFC for 2, knocked out Cameron Else in his last one, the English lad. Trying to remember what I saw in that one. Lots of kicking, lots of bouncing around, very long stance. Ended up on top and smashed him. Interesting, because Yadong is a decent striker and his wrestling has gone from strength to strength. Do you want to be bouncing around throwing kicks at him? Are you going to get easy takedowns on him like he did against Else? That's a very strange one, to be honest, because Kyler Phillips came in from the LFA like February last year and hasn't done an awful lot. So, I enjoyed his fights, the ones that I saw, but does seem like they're trying to feed him to Yadong there. I suppose the intrigue is that this is a bantamweight and Yadong is a featherweight, or has been a featherweight recently. I suppose a little bit of a reset is permissible there. You got Joey B on the undercard as well. Joe Benavidez versus Askar Askarov. That's nice. Askarov is still undefeated in MMA. Beat Pantoja tail end of last year. Oh no, midway through last year. Got a draw against Moreno in his UFC debut. And of course, Moreno's just been booked for the rematch with Figueiredo for the title. So yeah, compelling fighter. Very fun on the ground, getting better on the feet. Joey B, not the most technical fighter on the feet, but huge power for that weight class. And very scrambly on the ground. I mean, this could turn into a really fun ground fight if it goes there. Honestly, though, Joey B is like one of those guys. Well, I mean, like an Ian Heinisch. I could just watch people try and take him down all day because it's pretty entertaining watching him get up. Kai Kara France is on the card. Tim Elliott's backing against Jordan Espinosa. Is that Jordan Espinosa? No, I was confusing with the guy who slammed Matt Wyman. Oh my god! I just realised they got Kennedy Nchukwu on this card, and he's not very good for a start. You know, he got outstruck by Paul Craig and then triangled. But I just remember the UFC put out this image on social media of Sadiq Youssef, Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, and then Kennedy Nchukwu. It was like Nigerians went like 10-1 in the UFC this year or whatever it was, and it was basically Nchukwu was the only loss. And then it was just like, why are you including him? Just tell us how great those other three guys are. I have no idea how he's still in the... Well, I do have an idea how he's still in the UFC. That's the light heavyweight division. Sean Brady versus Jake Matthews. Interesting. And then not an awful lot else that I care about. But, I mean, solid night of fights. What am I most looking forward to? Probably Yan versus Sterling and Makhachev versus Dober. Oh, and Cruz versus Kennedy. Oh, and Benavidez versus... Do you know what? This might be one of the better fight cards for me in recent years. Anyway, let's wrap it there because I've got to get this out in time for people to actually listen to it before the fights, because I have a horrible habit of dropping things on like Fridays and then no one hears it. So I'm your boy Jack Slack. If you want to read the tactical guide to Israel Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz, sign up to Patreon, head to the Fight Primer, check it out there. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Megan Anderson finding that chin bless.